morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the moderator of P.O.D TV, Roku TV's World Edition. And I greet you live today from PBS Carolina in North Carolina, where I just did a great show. And I'll be talking about some of the issues that we talked about today. Just a reminder for those of you joining us around the world that on this show, we talk about global affairs, innovation, the war in Ukraine, and continue to navigate through the pandemic and where we are around the world with getting back to a new sense of normalcy and what a new normal looks like for all of us. So today, my monologue is based on just some insights. Today at PBS Carolina, we talked about a few things. We talked about inflation. We talked about the primary elections coming up and what to look for on Tuesday in North Carolina on May 17th. And we talked about entrepreneurship and how we can help small businesses. So I'm going to try to wrap it up with just like my concerns about inflation and talking about President Biden's approval ratings and why they're so low and what the president needs to do, in my opinion, to hit the reset button. First of all, let's start with the president. President Biden actually came into the office to restore a sense of normalcy to America. After he got elected, he was able to successfully vaccinate the American people to about 65%. He was able to get a $1.3 trillion infrastructure package through. He was able to unite NATO and Europe through relationships so that now they can actually assist Ukraine. And his foreign policy seemed to be not so isolationist. However, the war in Afghanistan, the pullout of Afghanistan, mixed messages on COVID, where he said first mask up, then don't mask. Then he said we're going to be free of the virus, and now we're still dealing with it, has left a lot of people confused. And when we add inflation at 8.5%, rising gas prices, it's very, very hard to understand what this president is going to do to communicate where he's been successful. His presidency is being defined by the terrible and unfortunate uncertainty we're feeling in America and around the world. The American people just don't feel normal again. And that's why they elected President Biden in the first place. They wanted to get rid of Donald Trump, and they wanted somebody that they felt could bring us back to a sense of calm. Now, inflation affects everybody. Someone making $40,000 a year has to pay the same as someone that makes $120,000 a year. Unlike unemployment, that affects a small percentage of the community, of the state, of the nation. So, what does the president have to do? Why has he been so unsuccessful? We'll talk about that today. But here's my final take. The Democratic presidents of the United States that have been successful have been outsiders with charisma. John F. Kennedy and Barack Obama are the two to come to mind. Southern Democrats like Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton were able to actually leverage Southern Democrat coalitions to be successful, along with the North, to win the White House. And Lyndon Johnson was also successful as well. Bill Clinton had both. He was a charismatic, an outsider, and a good Southern moderate Democrat. Joe Biden is none of those things. He's been an insider for over 60 years, spent most of his life in public service as a senator and then vice president. He's not an effective communicator, and I don't think he's been able to show the American people that the presidency is really about what you're communicating to lead our country forward. We'll talk about this today, but I wish the president all the best. But I do believe that his low approval ratings will have an impact on these off-year elections. And I think we're headed towards a gridlock where we're going to have a Democrat in the White House, a Republican Congress, and a Republican Senate. And that could be very disastrous for the American people. More to come as we have our show. I want to welcome today Mark Lee and Sasha Starr, and our war expert, Sasha Starr, and we've got, Joe Biden. Yes. So thank you all so much.
No problem at all. You were talking about the gridlock. I think that we saw some of the gridlock earlier this week when they tried to pass a bill that would codify with the rules around abortion and things along those
Yeah.
lines. So they tried to do that, and it did not go all that well because it went down the party lines. And oftentimes, when that happens, there is, as you just put it, gridlock and things along those lines. So even though there was an attempt to do that, I think that they pretty much knew that that was going to fail, even when they brought it up the first time. But I'd love to hear maybe Chris's thoughts around that and maybe some of the other people's thoughts as well, because they did try to pass that. I believe it was on Wednesday. And like I said, it did not succeed whatsoever, but definitely so I sometimes am puzzled why people even attempt to do these things. But then when I talk to friends of mine that are in the political analysis field, they say that sometimes you do those things in order to put some groundwork down, in order to kind of like put things in a narrative that you want in order to try to win and influence votes. But that's just kind of the thought that I think that people did it, and knowing that they would lose, but knowing that their base, and we know that whether it's the Trump folks, the MAGA folks, or whether it's people within the Democratic Party, there are bases that you are oftentimes appealing to. But what are your thoughts about that, Chris? Because, like I said, they pretty much knew that that was going to go down in flames when they put it up there and everything. But I would love to hear your thoughts, and maybe even Steve has some thoughts around that. And of course, we're going to get to Sasha and what's going on in the battle over there in Ukraine. And of course, later on this evening, we'll have that other show that talks about China, Russia, Ukraine, and all of that. And that'll be coming our way at 11 o'clock.
So, Mark, first of all, this is a good political move on the Democrats' part. Stop legislating from the bench. Stop that bull crap. If you're going to pass a law, pass a law. If you're not going to pass a law, don't pass a law. Don't sit there and let the Supreme Court legislate from the bench. You never want to do that. The whole reason for the Supreme Court, and if you take a look at it, it says to interpret the laws, not take a case and make a law out of it. It's to interpret the laws according to the Constitution of the United States. So get a law. And that's, much as I realized Trump had a mouth on him and he had Twitter fever, whatever it was, the one thing he wanted to do was, hey, do your job, Congress. Get the laws passed, do whatever you need to do, get them to me, and I'll either sign them or I won't. But the bottom line is that that's what's going to go on. Now, understand, Joe Manchin voted against that. So it was, if you get one Republican voting with the Democrats and you call that bipartisan, and you get one Democrat voting with the Republicans, is that also bipartisan? So now you got to take bipartisan and start redefining that. How many people does it take to get bipartisanship? Is it 2? Is it 5? Is it 1? Because if it's 1, that means bipartisan support. That's the way I'd read it as a Republican. I'd sit there and I'd say there was bipartisan support for going against the abortion issue. So I mean, right, Mark? I mean, you play that political leverage, right? Whatever that may be.
No, you play that political leverage. And speaking of playing political leverage, and I know we had one of his opponents that was here on the show, and maybe Nick will come by and have some thoughts about this. But we've had one of the opponents that is running against Rand Paul on a couple of our shows, and apparently Rand Paul was blocking passage of a 40 billion Ukraine aid package. So I'm trying to figure out what the whole move is in that sense from Rand Paul's standpoint. So if anybody got any idea why Rand would be blocking the Ukrainian aid.
I'll tell you, I'm glad he did. There is, and Sasha, this has, I realize this has to do with Ukraine, but we have no idea where that money is going. None. The weapons are going out to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians should be just as concerned about this as anybody else. How do we know those weapons aren't going to the Russians? How do we know those weapons aren't going to other countries? How do we know those weapons aren't going to Belarus? We have no idea. There's no accountability for those weapons. None. And I'll tell you something. You start with this high-tech weapon aspects and drones and all this stuff, and all of a sudden they start ending up in these really weird countries like Tajikistan or Uzbekistan or something like that, and being used by the dictators in those countries against their own people. That's when you got to really be careful about what you're doing. And that's all he's saying. He's saying, look, you account for the 40 billion and we're good. But there's no accountability. Here's your 40 billion, Ukraine. You do what you want with it. Nah, I'm with Rand Paul on that. Let's make sure that we get the accountability going and coming to make sure that all those weapons are accounted for when they're there and what they're being used for. So I
Speaking
can
of
understand.
speaking of accountability, and I definitely want to hear Sasha's thoughts around this. But one of the other things that is going on with Ukraine and everything is that we had mentioned about Finland and yes, Sweden wanted to join NATO and everything, but the Ottoman Empire, that being NATO, namely Turkey, has said that they're not supportive of those two countries joining NATO and all of that. So if anybody can explain to me, maybe you can, Sasha, why Turkey would not be in favor of those two countries joining NATO, because it seems to me that it would be logical for that to happen. But I don't know all the understanding of that area. So if you've got any ideas, Sasha, please enlighten me.
I will enlighten you first about the question raised by Chris about the accountability of money that are going to pay for Ukrainian weapons.
Mm-hmm.
A while ago, about a few weeks ago, Biden appointed a General Wolf, whose sole responsibility is nothing more, nothing less than oversee every penny and every weapon, or if it's a medical equipment or humanitarian help, exactly where it arrives, where it moves from the point of arrival to Ukrainian territory. Who is in Ukraine is responsible for weapons, for medical equipment, for humanitarian help, or so on. So accountability now has been established to the strictest controls. And if there somebody like Senator Paul would like to make it even stricter, and he knows how to do it, and he would be willing to travel over there to implement it, great. Let's just do it. Otherwise, close your mouth and keep it shut. Okay, Senator Paul? Thank you.
No, that
Well,
makes sense. That makes sense.
yeah.
Hey, Chris, and this is actually to you as well, because I know we've been saying that we wanted this for a while, but apparently there are actually war crime trials going on now. So Kiev is actually holding its first war crime trials since the invasion. What do we think is going to be the results of these war crime trials? And will there be an attempt to actually arrest Mr. Putin and all of that? Or how are these trials going to come to fruition? Because I was reading and I just heard that they're now having their first trials since the invasion. And of course, the invasion was several weeks back.
Well, Milosevic, right? Milosevic in Serbia. He stiff armed. He stiff armed those criminal investigations until finally somebody said, "Guess what? You're out." The minute they threw him out of the presidency, they extradited him, and then they ended up having war crime trials on his deal, and he ended up with a heart attack before they found him guilty, and then before they could sentence him, he died of a heart attack. As long as Putin remains as president of that country, they can do whatever state crimes, war crimes they want. But I'll tell you something. I think the Russian people are going to have to sit there and say, look, if you're no longer the president, you're out. The minute they say that, then they can extradite him to The Hague, and then go ahead and they have their war crime trials and watch Putin, squirm in the box.
I mean, and I'm only with this for a few minutes today, and I'll be back on Monday. But I think the bottom line is that, first of all, we have to continue to provide more weapons to Ukraine. That's the only way they're going to be able to win this war. But they clearly have exceeded expectations on how much they've been willing to fight. But I think that this, inflation, rising gas prices, and I'm going to talk about this next week in my monologue, because I think we have to talk about the energy strategy of the United States and the world, because we are too dependent on foreign oil right now, particularly with Russia. Let's not forget that Russia, this guy Putin, sells 25% of Europe's oil. But it's not just oil, it's oil, coal, and natural gas, fossil fuels, right? And I truly believe that the United States needs to produce more. We can produce more fossil fuels in the short term, and we can rely on Iran and Saudi Arabia and other countries to do this. And remember, in the 1970s, folks, Gerald Ford was in the White House. What did he do during the oil embargo crisis? They reduced the speed limit to 55 miles an hour, and they started developing more fuel-efficient cars, right? So we as a country can do things to deal with this energy independence. And that's the challenge, isn't it? We have to be able to have a short-term strategy of producing more fossil fuels. We have to get Europe to be able to import more natural gas and other fuels, oil and coal from other countries. And long term, we have to have a renewable energy strategy. So I call it an energy transition strategy. And that's what Fareed Zakaria has mentioned it too. And we don't even talk about that a lot. And so I think, my final point, and I'm going to talk about this more on Monday, we've talked on this show about affordable housing. We've talked about healthcare. We've talked about foreign policy. We've talked about energy independence. But when I look at the TV ads, it's a gun, building a wall, and abortion. And I supported Trump or I didn't support Trump. Those are the only things. So, Sasha, please tell me that in your elections in Canada, we're looking at all the issues, or has it just come down to that all these issues we're going to focus on later? I'm going to go with Sasha Starr. Ridiculous what's happening in our democracy?
The elections in Canada, like in many other countries, it's a type of a beauty contest. You see how the guy looks, how he speaks. Sometimes you even don't take a look at him at all. And whatever you feel you're more affiliated with this or another guy, that's who you elect, because all the discussions about the real issues, for example, a high inflation, okay, what Biden can do exactly to curb the high inflation? Nothing. He's a 78 years old guy who happened to be the president of the United States. What does he have to do with inflation? What he can do during the day, 7 in the morning, 9 in the morning, 12 o'clock, now it's 3 o'clock, now it's 6 o'clock, time for dinner. Then what? What exactly can he do today, tomorrow, yesterday, a month from now? Nothing. Why not to admit that he can do absolutely nothing? It's nothing to do with the fact that he's an evil man or he's a great man or he was elected just to replace a madman or he was elected because he was so brilliant and incredible. Absolutely not. He is just an average man who happened to become a president, and that's all to it. He cannot regulate inflation or economic growth or employment policies, and so his capacity is very, very limited in all aspects of economic and others as well.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything. I know that one of the other things I wanted to get to, I don't know if anybody else had thought about this as well, but other things that are going on have to do with social media. And apparently, we had this whole thing around Elon Musk and the takeover of Twitter. And now he's saying that deal for Twitter is on hold. So maybe he's not going to take over Twitter, even though he had said at one time that he was going to, he felt that Trump should be able to come back on to Twitter and all of that. And Chris, you're the cyber expert, and I'm glad that you're back today. Because I actually had a question for you that I was going to ask while you were gone and all of that. Because when it comes to cybersecurity, we oftentimes think about the bigger picture, like what the corporations are doing and things along those lines. But, sometimes people will kind of like ghost you, or not so much ghost you, but kind of like find out what you are doing and things along those lines, because they may get access to accounts and try to find out what you are doing and all of that. I know that in my own life, I've had relatives that have borrowed friends' accounts and borrowed relatives' accounts in order to check on me and maybe my brother and others as well. So what do you think about that? Because I think that is a rising trend where people, particularly in the older generation, may be trying to access the computer because they may not have as much knowledge of it. So they will try to borrow other people's accounts, and that can be a security breach, I would think. But I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the idea behind cybersecurity is that convenience equals vulnerabilities.
Right.
So the more convenience that you have, the more vulnerabilities that you insert into the formula. So if you want to do your banking by online, very convenient. there's a risk. If you want to do this, there's a risk. Now, what they're doing is they're mitigating that risk by doing the following things. They're saying, and all three of you guys, I know all three of you guys have this, and you've done this, is that you have hey, we're going to send a code to your phone. We're going to send a code to your phone that will verify that you are who you are. Your phone is your identity. This is really, really, really big. I mean, people are kind of like, oh yeah, I have my phone, I'm good with that. I'd like to count, and I'd like to do a study. I'd love to do a study. How many people do not have a passcode on their phone? Most people do. Oh, I got the facial rec, so I'm good. Do you know that I can put a photo of you up to your phone and get into your phone? That's facial rec. It doesn't do a 3D facial rec. So there's a lot of things that are going on that people don't understand is vulnerable. And what happens is that the companies, the companies that go out and do this stuff like Amazon or whomever else does this, they sit there and they say, we have 3-part authentication. The 3 parts of this, that which you know, that which you have, and that which you are. So that which you know are passwords. That's what you have is cell phones, and that's what you are is isometrics. Yeah,
I'm working on it. Before we go to a couple of national issues, I'm working on an op-ed for cybersecurity. But what I will tell you, from a city perspective, this is the elephant in the room that we never talk about. Every city in our state, every city in the country is vulnerable to cyber attack, and the way we're managing our networks is so archaic. Chris, I was recently at an event yesterday where a guy from Microsoft was talking about the very point you were talking about. Not only having 2-factor authentication, but having facial recognition so that you don't have all these passwords you have to manage, which can be compromised. And I think this is the greatest crisis that we face. The city governments and the state governments can be toppled just with a quick cyber attack.
Oh yeah.
And everyone says, well, let me just buy some software and it can do my network, but that's not enough because these cyber terrorists are getting, and that's what they are. They're terrorists, and
that's exactly right.
And I think that this is a topic I think we might bring in some experts to talk about cybersecurity. But before I leave, just a couple of thoughts. We got the elections coming up. Any observations? I was going to catch everyone up with the news tomorrow. I'm having some issues with the studio with my set, but real quickly before I head out, just a couple of things I want to go over. I think it's important to understand that the election is coming up on Tuesday in North Carolina, and it's really a litmus test of Donald Trump. Whether his endorsements are working. They seem to be working around the country. Pat McCrory looks like he's making a comeback, but we don't know. What do you all think is going to happen this week in North Carolina, swing state? You think it's going to be a good night for Republicans?
No, Bo Hines is not going to win. He is the Trump candidate. My prediction is he's not going to win, and that's good. That's a good thing. I'm sorry, but like I said, I voted for Trump twice. I supported him while he was getting bashed by everybody and their frickin' brother. But you know something? I'm done. I'm done with him. Move on. Let's get somebody else in there. Let's do some things. Let's do some things that are that we can do bipartisan aspects. Let's at least attempt to do those things. When we get in, and that I think that will serve the Republicans a lot better than sitting there and saying to Trump, because I think Trump's going to go out and form a third party. He's so much an egoist. I mean, I wouldn't call him a madman, Sasha, but he's an angry man. He's not a madman. He's an angry man. So he's going to go after,
But let me ask you a question.
Sure.
You just said that, in your opinion, Trump is so egoistical that he will run. I think just because of that, he's not going to run. How he can swallow just yet another defeat from Biden or from whoever there is. And trust me, if he will run for Republican, that's the only way how Biden can get second term.
Yeah.
Because Trump is no contender. He's a pathological liar, a criminal with so many lawsuits, including criminal against it. How such a man can run for president the third time only in America?
Hopefully not, Sasha. From your mouth to God's ears.
Real quickly, just a couple of things before I chime out for another trip. But Kevin McCarthy and others have been subpoenaed for the Trump insurrection. That's important to understand. Connor Lamb,
January 6th insurrection.
Connor Lamb, moderate, is did double digits behind. Pat McCrory is down by 15 points in North Carolina. Things are not boding well, but we will keep everyone apprised of the situation. There was I think an earthquake or something in Puerto Rico. I'll have to read up on that, but there's a tragedy there. And folks, it's been great being with you live from PBS. I will be back on Monday for another edition of Pod Roku TV, and it's an honor to be a part of this crew. I actually had to get dressed up, with my bow tie in honor of Ukraine, and Sasha Starr, thank you for your insight of Ukraine. We continue to play for Ukraine, and whatever we can do to send money, donations, just to the Red Cross. It's just keep praying for them. They're fighting hard. And North Carolina Hurricanes, we got Game 7. I'll be there tomorrow, and looking forward to them getting to the playoffs, advancing. But now I'm getting a little nervous. I don't like
it. It is a Game 7, and those are always nervous and everything. So definitely those going to be very much
intense,
nerve rattling, and all of that. There's no doubt about that. I know you said you were getting ready to go, but maybe Chris will take this one and everything, or maybe even Sasha or yourself. But it does seem like Biden is actually urging the cities around the country to spend their COVID relief money on police and crime prevention. So maybe shifting some of the money from COVID relief in order to hire more cops and actually to have some crime prevention kind of tactics as well. So what are your thoughts around that, my fellow panelists, this kind of shifting of the money away from COVID and into maybe more security in these various cities around the United States?
Well, let me take a stab before I head out. I think it's a good idea, although I do think might be a little bit premature because we see numbers starting to go up, other variants coming in. I've seen a lot of people get COVID. So I don't know whether we could do a hybrid model where we have a little bit of money going to COVID and some going to the police. But I like the idea of funding police. I think it's a good idea. I don't believe in defunding the police. And I think that we've got to focus on not only crime and the normal crimes we see, but the other issue we haven't talked about is opioid abuse. And I think that's a big problem in the U.S. And we've got to crack down on it, and giving more money for police to do and working with our attorney general is everything we need to do. So thank you for that. I'm going to let you guys go. I'll see you on Monday. And from my family to yours, we wish you all the best. Be safe wherever you are.
Yeah, yep, and we'll keep the conversation going on all of that. Hey, Sasha, I know, and maybe Chris has got some thoughts around this as well, that those fires have been really going over there in California. I believe they're also going on the western part of Canada as well. So how are things going in Canada in terms of trying to curtail those fires? Because I know that this has been an issue that has been very much in the news for months now, and all of that. And they were saying that here on like the California area, fires reduced 20 exclusive mansions to rubble. And I'm imagining they are probably impacting the western part of Canada as well. From what I understood, that there were some of those fires in that area. So if Chris Gecko or you have any thoughts around these fires that have still been raging for months and everything, and is there some way that we can get some control over these, because these fires have been going, like I said, for a while?
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, my answer actually will be very short. I trust in the Canadian firefighters. They are brilliant people, and they are going to deal with these fires the best of their abilities. And I'm very confident that they will do a good job. Period. Full stop.
I was going to make some predictions. Since Chris always liked to make predictions, I'm going to make some. Okay, here's my prediction. There are going to be fires in the West really bad this year. Hurricanes are going to hit the coast, especially along New Orleans. And there's going to be a mass gun shooting in the United States before the end of the summertime. Those are my predictions. Now,
well, you've already got one. Hold on a second. You've already got one of your predictions, because apparently 2 killed and 3 others were injured in a shooting at Dallas Entertainment District earlier today and everything. So you've already got one of your predictions.
And also, I'll make another prediction that cryptocurrency will collapse. Oh, Sasha, did you see it today? It went down. $300 billion was lost in the cryptocurrency. Now, in Sasha's show, we've been discussing that for weeks.
But Nick, don't forget, remember when there was a Super Bowl? Do you remember that all the advertising was about crypto?
I know that, right?
You have to buy this crypto and that crypto.
Right.
You buy it over here and over there, and then you can send your money. And all I was watching on television. Now, believe it or not, in Canada, they didn't show this crypto commercials.
Sure.
They show different commercials.
Because they're not stupid.
Yeah. But in the United States, it was all nothing about crypto.
Well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to create the IBM TV Pod TV coin. Here's what you do. You send us the money. I'll send you the coin.
Monopoly.
Really?
Money.
Yeah, Monopoly.
Yeah,
money.
yeah, we're gonna create, and you can definitely create your own coin. I know some people that are trying to create their coins. You know, yesterday we talked
I'll
about
create a lot
this.
of coin on that
We
one.
talked about this slain journalist is there in Israel, and apparently, the Israeli police attacked the funeral procession. So I'm still trying to figure out how isn't this going to be a PR nightmare if you're attacking a funeral procession and all of that? But hey, maybe they have ideas and reasons that they needed to do that. But it was the shot journalist Shireen Abu Alik, and definitely they're saying that they attacked the funeral procession earlier today. So as one that is now in the media field and everything, wouldn't that be just like a walking nightmare of a publicity disaster?
It's going to be a problem.
Now, I would like to address something very interesting. I would like to address now, I can see a wisdom of the anti-abortion laws to prevent abortions one and for all. You know why? Because there is a saying, speaking about crypto, that there is a sucker born every minute. So if abortion would be forbidden, there would be a sucker born every 30 seconds. We should make it even greater deal for cryptos and so on.
Sasa, if you can't beat them, you got a lot of ignorant people, you should join them. So, I mean, the thing is, creating your own cryptocurrency might be a great idea. Well, it probably was a good idea about a year ago or so. And getting people to send you their cold, hard cash while you send them these little tokens that may be worthless and probably are. But it was interesting to see today that the market fell $300 billion. And I expect more losses to take place. I listened to a lot of the people about crypto. Like I said, I got a Bitcoin sitting over there. I don't believe.
Yeah, I've got one laying around here somewhere. I think I got it. Well, I know I definitely have an
I've got a Monopoly game.
Yeah, I know I've got an NFT. I can't remember. I don't think I have a Bitcoin, but I definitely have an NFT floating around somewhere because somebody was giving it to me when I was doing an event and everything. You know, there is a Middle Eastern leader, and maybe this is going to impact the market as well, because apparently he passed away at the age of 73, and the country has announced a 40-day mourning period. So, you know, a lot of times when we think about oil-rich nations, the UAE definitely comes in mind, and their president, Sheikh Khalifa bin Saeed, has died at age 73. So is this actually going to impact the market? Because like I said, the UAE, from what I understand, is a major player in terms of oil and all of that. And I even know some people that have tried to go there. So
it will impact crypto. Crypto will go even lower because of that. That's my prediction.
I just don't see that economy isn't even close to what we have in the United States. Right. It's just not going to happen. I'll also make another prediction. Prediction. The Republicans will win the midterm elections this year, and they're going to take over the Senate, and they're going to take over Congress.
Oh, and then I have a prediction from that, Nick.
What?
They'll take over the Senate, and they'll take over the House. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to infight between the Trumpers, the Trumpers, and the non-Trumpers, and they won't get anything done because they're going to infight, and the Democrats are going to sit back and go ha 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 ha, and they're going to fight, and then 2 years from now, Democrats are going to take back over again because the Democrats. They infight. The minute they infight, it's over. And you know something? I love gridlock. Gridlock is great. Don't pass laws. Let me tell you something. I was with the federal government for 35 years. Every time they passed a law, it cost millions and possibly billions of dollars because the federal government had to churn up all this administrative bull crap to be able to do that. Let me give you an example. ACA. Everyone sits there and says, "Oh, you know, it provided, you know, healthcare and all that stuff." Hey, ACA was probably great for people. Let me tell you what it wasn't good for is taxpayers. You know what still goes out every year? 1095s. You know what 1095Bs are? You know what they are, Nick? You know what they are? They're bullcrap little that says, yep, you were covered 12 months this year with healthcare. I get 3 copies of them. 3. And you know what they're used for? Nothing now. They used to be, you had to attach them to your IRS form. Bull crap.
Speaking of nothing and everything, and while I definitely can understand why people would want to learn the history of some of our past leaders and all of that, something happened decades ago, and now this is coming into the forefront and all of this, because apparently there's been reports about what Thomas Jefferson did historically with the Native Americans and all of that. And this is actually just coming out in the news and everything. So apparently he once wrote to Congress that the U.S. would try to drive Native Americans into debt to take their land. He suggested encouraging Indian tribes to purchase goods on credit so that they would go into debt. And the president's comments were references in a report on U.S. Indian schools, which abused and forcibly assimilated children. So what is your thoughts around some of this time when we go and dig into history and find out what some of these people may have done against one group or another and all along those lines? Because apparently they were doing a report, and I know there have been some issues around that in Canada as well. So then they went and dug up some of these quotes about forcing people into debt, kind of like that sharecropper model, which was actually used in a lot of different societies, even poor Appalachian folks and definitely African Americans and a number of others. So it just sounds like he was trying to use the sharecropper model. But any thoughts on this and us trying to, I won't say rewrite history, but further analyze history?
Mark, I do appreciate the fact that, history has its different, forks in the road. And as as Yogi Berra said, if there's a fork in the road, take it, right? So basically what happens is you got this, I don't care. It's not that I'm indifferent. It's that my grandfather was mining limestone at the time of slavery, at the time all this crap was happening. He was not even an American citizen. He was mining limestone in Cosenza, Italy. I have nothing to do with the Native Americans having the issues with Thomas Jefferson. I have nothing to do with slavery aspects. I have nothing to do with any of that crap. Hey, my ancestors came over here. My grandfather was an indentured servant. He was injured mining limestone in Utah. And you know what happened? He was sent back with no money. Go back to Italy where you belong with a busted back. So, I mean, to me, it's kind of like, I sit back and I go, I get it. Bring it up. Talk about it, and then let's move on to something.
Oh, okay, yeah, and when you're talking about it, here's what really needs to be the conversation. You can forget the history. What are you doing today to improve your situation today? See, here's the real problem. Self-reliance and looking to yourself for the solutions are not what people are doing. They're always trying to assess the blame on somebody else. Let's blame this. Let's blame the government. Let's blame somebody else. But in reality, they need to assess what they are doing. I mean, I'm looking at this with this crazy, what do I call it, not enough baby formula. Oh, we can't survive without baby formula.
That's a media thing. Okay, media did that.
But wait, I said media certainly did that.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, let me ask you this. In the 1700s and the 1600s, how could babies possibly survive without baby formula?
There was a high mortality rate. Yeah,
there was a high mortality rate, but still people survived without
baby
formula. And not only that, a lot of people before those times made their own baby formula. Oh no, that means that we actually have to do something rather than go blame everybody else on things. And see, what we have is a culture of blame somebody else and have somebody else come and help me, okay, without looking at it. And when I was talking to Shaquille, because normally I'm like, tax the heck out of the rich, but here's a real problem. And this is a reality. A lot of the people I run into that make a lot of money work 80 hours a week. They don't work 40 hours.
Yep.
I am dead serious. Almost every person I met who is successful puts in 80-hour weeks. And here's the argument. Why should they have to pay more in taxes? And that's really an actually good argument. There should be some equality in that if I'm working 80 hours a week, I should actually get a reduction because I'm basically two of me, as opposed to working 40 hours a week. So the people that are successful actually do put in that type of time. Here are the people that are unsuccessful. I want to work 40 hours a week, and I want you to go tax the rich, and I want you to give me more money. Okay, All three are unsuccessful arguments because they're not willing to get off their butt, be self-reliant, and take care of the problem themselves before they look at everybody else. So this whining liberal media that we see out there is what Chris just said. The media is making up the baby formula crisis, and
That's
people
right.
are going, "Oh,
Yeah.
I can't possibly survive without baby." Come on.
Speaking of,
10,000 years.
no, I hear you.
9,000 years of people.
No, I hear you, Nick. I was going to get to another topic that we sometimes talk about as well. How can an entire country apparently just now get around to having, according to them, their first COVID cases? Because apparently North Korea announced an explosive coronavirus outbreak on Friday with 6 dead and 350,000 potential cases across the country since April. And just one day after the country admitted that COVID had finally reached it, state media outlets called the outbreak a public health crisis, though its extent remains unclear. So I'm still trying to figure out how North Korea has avoided what has apparently hit the rest of the world.
Mark, I just want to say one thing about COVID, and Nick, you'll agree with me on this. 500,000 people died, right? 500,000 people died, and Trump was totally responsible for those 500,000 people. Totally. His blood was on his hands. Do you know how many we have now? 1 million.
Right.
That means 500,000 people have died under Biden's watch.
That's correct.
Not one thing about blood on his hands. That's not one thing. Oh, why? Because he tried to vaccinate. Oh, he had the masking. Oh, he didn't have the masking. Oh, he didn't have this. So all of a sudden, it's President Biden. All of a sudden, has this. Well, let's give more money to COVID relief. And
he has a media pass, by the way.
Exactly.
Well, apparently that's what's going on in Korea as well, because apparently Seoul's National Security Office slammed the test in a Thursday statement, saying North Korea had turned a blind eye to the lives and safety of its people and continued ballistic missile provocations. So I guess they're trying to say, hey, y'all might have had your first case, but y'all are also over here firing shots at us and all of that. So I guess they're trying to say that that's more important than the pandemic that we're in the middle of and all of that. So I don't know what y'all's thoughts are, but apparently they're trying to deflect.
North Korea is run by a paranoid nut. I mean, the thing is, what are you supposed to do? I mean, the guy doesn't play well with anybody, and the only person worse than him on the planet right now is Vladimir Putin, who not only does this, but the way he does it and tries to influence the rest of the world to believe his lies. And the funny thing, because there was something even today on LinkedIn, it was complete. You could read through it. Complete Russian propaganda supported by Russians stuck on LinkedIn. They start off with, oh, you got to read this video, otherwise it's going to be deleted. Then you read the video, it goes, it's the United States who caused the war in Ukraine. What are they talking about? I mean, the whole thing was garbage from beginning to end, but the Russian propaganda machine is incredible. And North Korea doesn't have a big propaganda machine, but they're basically a failed state. Why should we even listen to them? They're ridiculous. So what the West needs to do is, and this is the only thing that came out of the Ukraine war, they united NATO and they united the West, and woke us up to realize that there are some countries out there that hate us. Okay, and one of them may be China, and China is a bigger threat than Russia because China is actually. They do have 1.6 billion.
Well, speaking of China is, from what I understand, China has been very much involved in, for lack of a better term, the sexual trades that go on, and all of that has definitely been an issue that I know some folks have been concerned about. They've been talking about that whole concept of human trafficking, and apparently there was a case even here in Durham where a man forced local ladies to be prostitutes down there in Myrtle Beach. But I was just wondering, to all of y'all, how concerned are you about human trafficking? Because I remember before COVID, there was a lot of conversations around that, and that it was definitely a issue that was going on in the world, and definitely there was even some things that were coming out of Eastern Europe and definitely Asia and other places. So I was just wondering, maybe I'll take that to Chris since he's a data analyst and everything.
Maybe he's a subject matter expert in human trafficking. I'm not involved in that business, so let's bring over Chris. Maybe he's an expert in that business.
The thing is that there's things that drive people, right? And greed is one of those things.
Yes.
Get the most amount of money for the least amount of work, and the amount of harm to me, right? The selfish people, selfish greed, right? It doesn't hurt me, So, and I make money, and we all make money. Life is good, and all I'm doing is I'm satisfying my customer needs. I am a facilitator for my customer. And let me tell you something. This is like people sit back and they go, how can they rationalize this? All right, let's go to the bigger picture. How can Putin rationalize invading a sovereign country because there's Nazis there? I mean, so people can rationalize anything given their mental state, given their possibilities, given enabling what they've already had. If Biden and Obama would have told Putin, no, you're not going to take Crimea. No, you're not going in there. We're going to put troops in Ukraine. And if there's going to be an issue, you're going to be attacking American troops. But stop them right there. And that would have been it. Nope. Here's Crimea, and we're going to sanction the crap out of you. And that's going to teach you a good lesson. And that led to what? Well, if I take, it's a 2-year-old. Putin is a 2-year-old. You're not allowed to eat your broccoli. Eat your broccoli. You didn't eat your broccoli. Well, okay, that's all right. We'll give you some ice cream too. I mean, this is horse poop. And the same thing with sex traffickers. That happens everywhere. United States, Canada, Mexico, every place it happens. Why do we let this happen?
For sure.
Why is it being enabled?
Where's our public flagging pole? We should strap them to a pole and let people see what happens here. If it really does happen at China's watch, I think Xi Jinping would be totally against it, just like we would. This is something we could agree with the Chinese on, because at least at the highest levels, they're just not going to get involved in that type of trash. Mark, I have to admit, I don't hang around with the sex trafficker crowd. I never have. So all my clients, all the people I've worked with, associated with, I've never seen one. So I'm sure there's a underbelly somewhere that likes that type of stuff. And this is in the United States. If that's a problem, we need to, get to it early and quash it out. But like I said, I've never seen it, I must admit.
There have been a couple of activists. I know that Sonny Slaughter and others have been working on that issue.
Most rich people and people that are successful don't engage in businesses like that. It's just the way it is. It's just not a good business. So I look for other businesses to get into.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Speaking of good businesses, apparently Britain has sanctioned 12 members of Putin's inner circle, accusing them of hiding his ill-gotten riches in return for influential state positions. They include his ex-wife, Ludmila Acharatana, and his rumored girlfriend, Alina Kabava, a 38-year-old former Olympic gymnast. So the UK government said she was alleged to have a close personal relation with Putin, and we were exposing and targeting the shady network propping up Putin's luxury lifestyle and tightening the vice on his inner circle, is what their foreign secretary Liz Truss said in a statement. So we will keep going with sanctions on all those aiding and abetting Putin's aggression until Ukraine prevails.
Well, that's the reason they're losing the war. The oligarchs were siphoning off the money. Putin would send checks out for them to buy bombs and tanks, and they'd end up buying yachts and big apartments in London. And so they don't have a modern army. They basically have a third world army. Now they're going to see what a first world army looks like as soon as we send the military over, as soon as Rand Paul gets off his butt. 40 billion may be too much, but certainly there's some billion that is correct.
I think the Soligar have a point. Let's see, when you have a yacht in the Mediterranean, right?
Sure.
Oh, you can rent it to somebody. You can use it for something. How you can rent a bomb or use it in any meaningful way? Absolutely not.
You can't unless you invade Ukraine. No, Sasha, you're absolutely correct. War weapons are useless unless you have some use for them, like in Ukraine. See, the thing is, I think the oligarchs were sitting there going, okay, this whole Cold War stuff's over, so I might as well siphon the money off and use it for my beautiful yacht, my beautiful townhouse in London, my great lifestyle I have around the world. Who's going to miss the fact we don't have a modern army? Ha, ha, ha. And then Vlad goes, let's take our modern army and attack Ukraine. And then they're all going like, oops, we don't have a modern army. We have a third world army. We're losing to Ukraine.
You said earlier that you can justify almost anything. And I want to give you a great example. Yesterday in Toronto, there was a so-called monk debate when they have, sometimes I follow them, but I don't see that very often, but I do follow. I remember I even went to Roy Thompson Hall because Gary Kasparov was there on one side, arguing that the question was at the time he was with Lisa Applebaum, and the question was whether West should contain Russia somehow, or maybe even completely block them from the cultural, economical life. I think it was 8 years ago, and all these questions are today. So the question, is the West going to isolate Russia? It was after invasion of Crimea. Or they supposed to become friends with Russia and understand each other and so on. So yesterday was essentially continuation of same. So there was a well-known charlatan, Professor Merschmeyer or something. My God, what a person. And he had some kind of bimbo on his side. I don't remember the name. And there was a former ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, and Robert Sikorsky from Poland, distinguished politician, a member of European Union, and so on and on and on. So the same thing happened. Is West going to isolate and get Russia out of all this international organization, completely isolated, ignore it, put for 100 years on the same status of North Korea, or West should somehow find understanding with Russia? And this Professor Merschmeyer, his actually argument was that it's NATO and United States are guilty of this war in Ukraine. Putin has nothing to do with that. Ukraine has nothing to do with that. It's NATO and United States engineered, orchestrated, and got this war going, and they are responsible for all that and all those deaths and everything else. How you can argue with a man like this?
Well, I mean, you can't. That's an interesting argument. But speaking of interesting arguments, apparently we oftentimes talk. I know you've been trying to get us into this particular part of the world, and there are two stories involving China. So I was going to mention both of them really quickly because apparently Xi Jinping's zero COVID is causing discontent in his country. So there are actually some folks that are not that happy because it's a very strict policy and all along those lines. So they've actually even been having cases where they are encountering some of the forces in their government that are trying to get them to enforce their roles. And actually earlier today, and it was definitely going on yesterday as well, our president, Joe Biden, opened a gathering of Southeast Asian leaders with a promise to spend $150 million on their infrastructure, security, pandemic preparedness, and other efforts aimed at countering the influence of our rival China. So on Thursday, Biden started a 2-day summit with the 10-nation Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, in Washington, with a dinner for the leaders at the White House ahead of talks at the State Department on today. So he smiled broadly as he took pictures with these leaders that were from places like Brunei, Indonesia, Cambodia, Singapore, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Malaysia. So maybe our good friend Sharif will be interested in that, and the Philippines, and all along those lines. So what do you think about this idea that we're going to send money not just to the Ukraine, but we're also going to send it to China or to these Asian countries to help them kind of buffer against China, because we do know that China is the main one that we are going against at this time. So he said he's going to send some money. What's your thoughts?
He's an idiot who says they're going to send money over them. We need money here, Mark. Remember the stat that we showed? Social Security goes broke in 2026. Right. Excuse me. Social Security goes broke in 2034. Medicare goes broke in 2036. There are bills in Congress right now to reduce Social Security benefits. Or if you're receiving another benefit like a government pension, you're not going to get Social Security. All right. With all the United States fiscal irresponsibility, you're telling me we're going to send money over to Asian countries? Are you out of your bloody mind? Whose crazy idea was it? Let me just take one.
Well,
guess.
let me give you let me give you a quote. Hold on a
Crazy.
second, Nick. Let me give you a quote, because a senior U.S. administration official, don't know who this person was, says we need to step up our game in Southeast Asia. We are not asking countries to make a choice between the United States and China. We want to make clear, though, that the United States seeks a stronger relationship. So, and like I said,
right.
it includes a 40 million investment in infrastructure in China to help decarbonize the region's power supply, and 60 million in maritime security.
Invest the 40 million here in the United States, my friend. Okay, now here's another stat. This is the trading that we do with China each year, 642 billion. Remember, they basically run our manufacturing sector right now, because what happened is we exported our manufacturing over there because of, quote, cheap Chinese labor. And then we bring all the stuff back over here and charge it. You know who made a lot of money off that? The person who did the deal. In other words, the top 1%, the guy that goes, hey, I can get you cheaper goods here in the United States. And so what happens is our manufacturing center, and you saw that what happened in North Carolina, our entire, we actually had a furniture industry at one time. It's completely was decimated between NAFTA and between what happened with China. There is no manufacturing sector here. Our steel industry, the same thing, decimated, and whose fault is that? Well, it's obviously the U.S. government's fault. Now you want to send them more money? Are you out of your mind when we're 30 trillion in the hole? And so I do agree with Rand Paul to a certain extent. You do have to have accountability for the 40 billion, and the 40 billion may be too big of a number. And we're going to have to seriously look at the pocketbook. But at the same time, we do need to support Ukraine. You can't just wipe it away. The sad part about the Biden administration, I've seen this in my own practice, they overspend in areas they don't have to. And they did that with a company that a government agency we interface a lot with, called the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. They were 13 billion in the hole. You know what the government did? They gave them 80 billion, enough to cover the hole and then some. You know what they're doing now? They're auditing our small plans. And I'm talking about plans that have 100,000 in them. Okay. And they're spending an enormous amount of time. It's almost a crime what they're doing, because I'm going wait a minute, my clients don't have the money to spend 50 to 100,000 on an audit when the total amount of the plan is 100,000. This is typical, and this is the thing that this is the reason why I was Republican before I switched to Democrat, and I might switch back to Republican. This is the typical things that the Democrats do. And Elizabeth Warren is the worst. She has no concept of how it is out in the real world. She sits there and lives in La La Land. Barry Sanders is even worse than she is, if that's possible. So the Democratic Party really has no leaders. In other words, it's a headless horseman. Lord knows if the headless horseman can keep parading around like they know what they're doing. And then you move to the right, you've got Donald Trump. Not a headless horseman, but the horse's ass. So, you got, and that's what we have in the United States of America, and so it's very difficult. Hopefully, somewhere along the line, a new leader will emerge that's actually sensible, strong, and somebody who's not a complete nut to lead the country. But right now, I agree with David M. Walker. I love going on his show because he says we have a leadership vacuum. And the problem with David, a guy who's really smart, he has a hard time getting elected. People don't want to listen to smart people. They want to listen to stupid people because stupid is and stupid does.
That's true and everything. And we're ready to wind down because we got to get Sasha over to his other show. Did you have something quickly that you were trying to add, Chris, before we hit these lovely people running around and all of that?
No, I'm good. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. So we're going to show these people running hither and thither. And I know that definitely Sasha will be talking about China, Russia, and Ukraine in his show. So that'll be coming your way right about now. But right now, let's get on out of here with these people running around throughout the world and all of that. So definitely always great having this amazing conversation. And we're ready to get on out of here.